A few years ago, the Harvard Business Review wrote an article about a study that was about determining the proper ratio between compliments and criticisms. And the study found that the most effective teams or organizations or communities have a ratio for every one criticism. That's a bad idea. That'll never work. There are 5 compliments. It's wonderful to be with you. That idea is spot on. Thank you so much for your help with this. What you organized yesterday was tremendous. Just imagine the future we have together. 1 to 5. And this research is mirrored in studies that people have done of couples who do well together. For every... That was a stupid thing you said last night at the dinner party. This meal is wonderful. You look terrific. That was so interesting what you said the other day. I had a great time with you. I love you. 1 to 5. Now, this ratio isn't meant to suggest that constructive criticism isn't important. We all need to know what we should or could do better. But assuming that an individual or a relationship or an organization isn't about to drive off a cliff, then it's pretty good to lean into the good stuff, to adhere to this ratio. Every criticism, 5 compliments. Think about that. In every meeting, for every minute you would spend being negative, you'd have to spend 5 minutes fostering positivity and goodwill. Imagine what would happen. For every, no, I don't like this. I like this, I like that, I like this, I like that, I like you. Can you imagine what would happen? Last night's meeting went on forever. We just spent the whole time talking about how thankful we were for one another. I wonder if this 5 compliments for every single criticism ratio applies to God and our relationship to God. I think it probably does, because our relationship to God is not unlike our relationships to one another. Throughout the Old Testament, or the Hebrew Bible, God employs a spousal analogy to describe our relationship to God, to describe the joys and sorrows, the dangers and wonders, the pleasure of union and the despair of unfaithfulness. So it's worth asking, in this divine human relationship, us and God, is God sufficiently positive and complimentary, or is it critical and negative? Sometimes it seems like God's judgment overshadows God's grace, and people don't want that. We're hard enough on ourselves to imagine a God who's just out to get us, and they walk away. They leave the church, they leave God, and this is unfortunate. We look at the Bible sometimes and we think that the God who is there is angry and wrathful, rather than the God who creates the world just to be with us. The God who, after every event of creation, declares it to be good. And it was good, 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 over and over and over again. And then Jesus comes, and Jesus is supposed to be good news, but the subsequent proclamation about Jesus can be pretty divisive too. We might quote Jesus and say something like, "No one comes to the Father except through me." But then the person who is quoting Jesus uses that me to refer to themselves and whatever they think about God rather than what Jesus thinks about all of creation. And Jesus or God is meant to certify our own goodness. God loves me, but you're bad, you're bad, you're bad, you're bad, you're bad. That's not the ratio. I think I've read the whole Bible at some point or another, but I've never actually kept track of the compliments to criticisms thing. You kind of just know, don't you? Which people tend to be positive and supportive. We can do it. Which people tend to be negative. That'll never work. Why'd you do that? Which messages are good? We can do it. Think about our future. Which messages are destructive? You're a failure. You've always been a failure. You just kind of know. You don't need to keep track. We just know. Well, Easter is God's eternal exclamation point. It is God's concluding judgment in the best sense, about who we are and what creation is. So it doesn't matter what month it is. It doesn't matter if it's April, May, June, July, August, September, October. It's always Easter. That was that quote from the Pope back in November of 1986. We, the Pope said, and by that I think he meant every Christian, every person. We are an Easter people, and Alleluia is our song. An Easter people. So this means that the first word and the last word, and probably every word that is in between, recognizes God's final saving love for creation and how this conquers everything else, all our negativity and pessimism, our illness, our death. The Easter proclamation is God's infinite, yes, overwhelming, all the world's persistent no's. You can't do that. And so this is good primer for really hearing today's wonderful reading and hanging on Jesus' repetition of phrases. I'm the good shepherd, Jesus says. The good shepherd lays down his life for the sheep. I am the good shepherd, Jesus says. I know my own, and my own know me. I am the good shepherd, Jesus says. I have other sheep who do not belong to this fold. I must bring them also. I am the good shepherd, Jesus says. These other sheep will listen to my voice, and there will be one flock, one shepherd. I am the good shepherd. Again and again and again, Jesus is the good shepherd. But how is this good shepherd, the one who creates everything, the one who brought everything into being, and without him not one thing came into being, the one who in the end will draw all things to himself, how is this good shepherd sometimes turned into a sort of hired hand or a wolf who would scatter us into different small flocks? How does this good news that is big and universal turn into bad news that is small and exclusionary? Oh, we've seen it everywhere, haven't we? We know what a scattered flock looks like. A scattered flock is a community in disarray, where negativity reigns, fearfulness reigns, where people bicker and fight and criticize and do not welcome the stranger, and nobody comes. A scattered flock is a country where rulers don't care for service, but only care for power and praise. A scattered flock is when we only pay attention to the death toll on one side of a conflict. A scattered flock is when we gain our whole identity from whatever small flock we are a part of, or just from our own accomplishments, our wealth, our wisdom, our works, or even more terribly, our whole identity from everything that is wrong about us, our addictions, our illnesses, our sickness, rather than our whole identity coming from what God has said about us and creation. It is good. It is very good. And so Jesus' words today land differently. There will be one flock, one shepherd, and I am the good shepherd. One flock, one shepherd. Now, is this good news? Is it a compliment to our way of life or a criticism? Because if you scatter enough, if you make your flock small enough, you can end up surrounded by other sheep who look and sound and act and hate and love and do all the same things that you do. And it's pretty comfortable. And you can end up in this little flock, and you can build a fence around it, and you can even put a flag outside with all your favorite colors. And even in that little flock, the positivity can just abound. You just be critical about all the other little flocks that are out there. But then here comes Jesus, the Good Shepherd, coming up to every little flock, unlocking every gate, scaring away every hired hand or wolf we have followed who we think will protect us, until we're all gathered together and we look around and we see the sheep who are next to us and we think, well, that can't be right. They can't be here. It might be a little uncomfortable, a little unsettling. And then Jesus will say to us, you belong to me. They belong to me. He belongs to me. She belongs to me. We all belong to one another together. And there will be one flock, one shepherd. Tough news. Good news. Thanks be to God.